Hey guys, it's ayebeepeee and welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing another Talking CJ, and this one is going to be on the database Codis. You do hear Codis mentioned a lot in my cases because it is the major database that people in the criminal justice field use. So what exactly is Codis? Codis stands for the Combined DNA Index System. It is a database that's based in the United States, and it is created and maintained by the FBI. And they use DNA in the system for people that have been committed of some pretty heinous crimes such as murder, rape, sexual assault, kidnapping, anything to that nature that could harm somebody else. And child abuse is another one. And the goal for this is that while the database grows with DNA, it's going to be a lot harder for serial offenders to continue to do what they do and way easier for us to catch. And to be honest, this CODA database is almost perfect at finding exact matches. And Codis is currently in 203 federal, state, and local laboratories that have agreed to work with this system. And it has become international, and it's in 58 countries. And the access is restricted to certain people in the criminal justice field, such as law enforcement, and only used for identification purposes. So the technical working group actually created the database Codis. They had put it in 14 laboratories at first, which were both state and local laboratories. And in 1994, the DNA Identification Act was passed by Congress. And this act directly affected Codis by giving the FBI permission to make these offender profiles and separate sample profiles for any DNA found at crime scenes. This act also required that any laboratory that was participating with Codis to be up to standards. They needed to maintain their accreditation and also keep up their licensing. This just really helped ensure that these laboratories that were working with this database be able to be as credible as possible, and labs would routinely be tested to make sure that they are uploading everything in here in a timely manner and able to work their way around this database. So in 1998, there was another branch in the Codis system that they implemented, and this one's going to be referred to as NDIS, and we will talk about that one a little later. This did start in October of 1998 with only 9 states, but it did end up expanding to all 50. And there were tools put in place on this database that helped us identify missing people and unidentified people better. And as of April 2016, Codis is actually used in 90 international laboratories in 50 countries. And April 21st, 2021, the 20 millionth DNA profile was placed on the Codis database. 20 millionth. And today, all 50 states, DC, federal police, the Army Laboratory, and Puerto Rico are all participating in Codis at the national level. So in the Codis DNA profile, you do have to have 26 tested locations of the DNA. These are referred to as STR, and they're like the short little repeating sections of DNA. So when you're testing the DNA, that little portion that you are testing is called the locus. But you have 2 sets of repeats, one from your mom and one from your dad. And the number of the repeat copies is recorded. So once a match is identified in the Codis software, and the laboratories that each submission came from is notified, and they exchange their information to make sure it is also a match. So they're like really thorough with this. So then a law enforcement agency will use a court order to obtain this knowledge from both laboratories, and then whichever law enforcement agency needs to will file a court order to get a DNA sample from the person they think it is as a known DNA sample to test against these two to also make sure it's a match. So what exactly does this database look like? So a profile profile itself has some criteria it has to meet. Obviously, the DNA results have to be able to be interpreted, and the reference samples for this DNA profile have to be accurate and complete. And then there's 3 levels of information. The first level is the local DNA index system, which is LDIS, and this is where the DNA profiles originate. They come to this area first. And then the next level is the state DNA index system, which is known as the SDIS. And this just contains all the DNA profiles of obviously your state. And then the last one is the National DNA Index System, which is the NDIS. And this is clearly all the DNA profiles of your nation. So there's different categories on this site of where the DNA profiles can go. There is an offender index, and this is obviously the DNA profiles of any offenders. There's an arrestee index, and this contains all the DNA of anybody arrested. And then the forensic index, which is all crime scene evidence samples. There's also a national missing person DNA database, and this is all DNA of missing persons or relatives' DNA of missing persons and unidentified human remains. So Codis very much values privacy. So on the national level, when you look up DNA profiles, they only have a little bit of information. They have the DNA profile, and then they have the agency identifier, and this is just which agency was submitting the DNA, and then they have the specimen identification number. And something Codis also does is take DNA from anyone that would be working around these laboratories of their staff. That way, in case for some reason there was a contamination, they could try to rule out their DNA and possibly save their results. So the original purpose of Codis was actually to help build a database that could identify sex offenders pretty quickly. Over time, it has completely expanded to obviously way more than that. Currently, right now, all 50 states collect DNA from their convicted felons, and quite a bit of states still collect DNA from their juveniles and people that are just arrested and not even convicted of a felony. But there is controversy around collecting the DNA of these people and sending it to Codis. It is argued that actually it's a violation of your right to proper search and seizures. But the U.S. Supreme Court did decide in Maryland versus King that the collection of DNA from people that are arrested and not even convicted yet, along with everyone else that is convicted, is actually reasonable. And then there is the familial searching. Families do share DNA. A DNA profile is very individualistic unless you have an identical twin. And Codis is actually really good at connecting paternal profiles also. But that's as far as Codis can really do, is find a direct match with you or your parents. It's not great with siblings or cousins or anything farther than that. And as of April 2018, 12 states have approved the use of familial searching as a legitimate way of finding convicted felons or missing people, things like that. Since 1998, this has single-handedly helped identify missing and unidentified people in 545,000 cases. That is incredible. And as of September 2020, NDIS contains more than 14 million profiles that are for offenders, 4 million for arrestees, and more than 1 million of forensic profiles from like crime scenes. Codis has aided in 520,000 investigations and produced more than 530,000 hits. Like, think of having that many people never identified. 530,000. And that is what I have learned about Codis. I am just always so amazed by hearing the statistics on Codis and how much it has helped. I cannot imagine not having something like this. There's so many cases that would have just never been solved, people that would never be found or just identified. But thank you guys so much for watching, and leave in the comments below your thoughts on Codis, and also leave down there any suggestions you have for talking CJs. And if you haven't already, please go back and watch my Unsolved in West Virginia series, because I'm working on season 2. It's going to be out soon, and I just want that series to get all the love it can get. I've worked so hard on it. Please like and subscribe for me, and hit that notification button. That way you're notified the next time I upload. Thanks again for watching, guys. Bye.